Guten Tag, meine Damen und Herren. Herzlich willkommen bei diesem Webinar über Elektromobilität in den Niederlanden mit heute das Thema über Zero-Emission in Städten. Es freut mich sehr, dass wir heute 3 niederländische Sprecher haben, die alles erzählen können, wie das in den Niederlanden organisiert ist. Und dass da verschiedene deutsche Städte sind, die manchmal noch ein bisschen reinkommen, aber wir fangen heute an um 2, so dafür sind wir auch jetzt angefangen. Mein Name ist Herman Idema, tätig bei APPM, ein Beratungsunternehmen in das Bereich von nachhaltiger Mobilität, Infrastruktur, Wasserbau und andere niederländische Themen, aber seit 2 Jahren sind wir auch unterwegs in Deutschland. Und im Auftrag von der niederländischen Botschaft in Berlin organisieren wir die 4 Webtalks über Elektromobilität in den Niederlanden, mit heute das Thema Zero-Emission in Städten. Wir fangen an mit ein paar technische Aspekte, die auch sehr, sehr wichtig sind. Am ersten, schalten Sie bitte Ihre Mikrofon und Video aus. Das macht alles für die Sprecher besser zu verstehen voneinander. Und natürlich die Video ist für die Internetconnection auch sehr wichtig, dass die nicht so viel genutzt wird. So vielen Dank dafür. Wenn Sie Fragen haben, können Sie dafür die Chat nutzen. Die ist verfügbar an die rechte Seite von der Schirm. Und wir probieren natürlich wie viel wie möglich die Fragen voneinander nach jeder Präsentation zu beantworten. Und das sind, normalerweise in die niederländische Kultur ist es sehr angenehm, dafür Fragen zu haben, so kein Problem, eher mehr dann wenig Fragen zu stellen, so alle Fragen sind herzlich willkommen bei uns. Und am dritten, es kann natürlich sein, dass es auch Fragen nach dem Webtalk gibt oder heute technische Probleme gibt, dann können Sie dafür meine deutsche Kollege Kolja Svensson erreichen via svensson@appmgmbh.de. So das sind die wichtigen technischen Aspekte für heute, die auch sehr wichtig sind. Und nach dem Webtalk würden wir auch nach alle Teilnehmer unsere Folien von heute teilen und auch ist die Video von die Webtalk dann auch voreinander verfügbar. Ich fange sehr gerne an mit einem kurzen Überblick über Elektromobilität in den Niederlanden, sodass ein anderer gut verstehen kann, wie das auch genau funktioniert. Wir haben das auch in die letzte Webtalk von Dienstag schön besprochen. Die wichtige Sache sind natürlich, Deutschland ist viele Male größer dann die Niederlande, aber die Niederlande sind ein bisschen weiter unterwegs mit Elektromobilität. So das Marktanteil von die Anzahl der Elektroautos ist absolut größer in den Niederlanden. Die Niederlande haben viel mehr öffentliche Ladeinfrastruktur, aber wenn wir weiter gucken nach 2030 und die Ziele, dann sind eigentlich die Ziele in Deutschland und den Niederlanden für das Anzahl Elektroautos, das Marktanteil gleichbar und das ist auch so für die Gesamtanzahl für Ladeinfrastruktur. Was wichtig ist über Elektromobilität in den Niederlanden, um ein bisschen zu wissen, wir sind schon seit lange unterwegs. Die Förderung für Elektroautos, PKWs ist da seit dem Jahr 2008. Und das macht auch, dass viele Städte haben mit Elektromobilitätskonzepten. Wie ist das genau organisiert? Wie läuft das? Und sie machen dann auch Ansatz für verschiedene Zielgruppen. Und da würden wir heute natürlich auch sehr gerne über sprechen. Über ÖPNV, Logistics, aber auch über Taxis zum Beispiel. Und was auch sehr wichtig ist oder ein USP ist für Elektromobilität in den Niederlanden, ist der Aufbau von öffentlicher Ladeinfrastruktur, obwohl viele Leute nicht die Möglichkeit haben, ein PKW zu Hause zu parken. So sie nutzen das öffentliche Raum und nutzen dafür auch öffentliche Ladeinfrastruktur. Gibt es noch ein bisschen Hintergrund. Der niederländische Klimatansatz ist organisiert via ein Klimaatvertrag, das letztes Jahr organisiert ist. Es gibt da in verschiedene Themen, wo das Thema Mobilität und nachhaltige Mobilität auch sehr, sehr wichtig ist. Das sehen wir hier auch genau. Es gibt auch andere Themen, aber es gibt auch ein paar Beispiele, die für heute wichtig sind. Am ersten Fokus auf ÖPNV, so bei 2025 sollen alle neue Busse in ÖPNV sollen voller Emission frei sein und bei 2030 sollen alle ÖPNV-Busse emissionfrei sein. Und das heißt am meisten, dass die Busse auch elektrisch sein sollen. So, das ist auch ein wichtiger Ansatz, weil wir heute auch weiter übersprechen. Ein anderes wichtiges Thema für heute ist auch die City Logistics, weil viele Städte die Ziel haben und das Idee haben, dass die City Logistics emissionfrei sein soll bei 2025. Das ist eigentlich sehr schnell, also wir sprechen über 4 Jahre, dass das fertig sein muss. So. Ich gehe da nicht über in Detail, dafür haben wir heute verschiedene Sprecher eingeladen. Da würde ich etwas mehr über erzählen. Am ersten noch das Überblick über die 4 Webtalks. Wir organisieren, so letzten Dienstag war eine Introduktion über Elektromobilität in den Niederlanden. Davon ist auch ein Video und sind auch die Folien verfügbar. Heute sprechen wir über Zero-Emission in Städten, City Logistics und so weiter. Nächste Woche noch über Ladeinfrastruktur und wie die niederländischen Städte die Elektromobilitätskonzepte erstellen und bearbeiten. Für heute, was ist das Programm genau? Da haben wir 3 Sprecher. Am ersten Herman Wagter von Connekt. Dann Herr Frank ten Wolde, er ist ein Kollege von mir bei APPM, aber ist auch tätig für die Stadt Rotterdam und bespricht die Beispiele von der Stadt Rotterdam, obwohl die Stadt Rotterdam leider selbstständig heute nicht verfügbar war. Wir sind sehr froh, dass Frank das machen kann. Und Frau Jillian von der Gaag von der Stadt Amsterdam, die natürlich auch sterke Ziele hat für emissionsfreie Mobilität bis 2030. Wir haben ein Programm mit die 3 Sprecher. Ich erwarte 50 bis 20 Minuten pro Sprecher und danach auch ein Q&A. So wir sollen ungefähr 60 Minuten unterwegs sein heute. Dann möchte ich sehr gerne Herr Herman Wagter einladen, wenn man Fragen gibt. Bitte nutzen Sie dafür die Chat, wie gesagt. Und sehr gerne Herr Herman Wagter. Ich denke, dass er auf Englisch es macht. Herman, are you able to switch on your microphone and video?
Herzlich willkommen.
Yes, thanks.
Ich versuche mal auf Deutsch. Mein Deutsch ist reicht, um alles zu lesen und um die Ferien zu gehen. Vielleicht reicht es auch in diesem Talk. Wenn es nicht geht, dann schalte ich nach Englisch, weil das ist ein gewisses Subjekt. Herman, das Gehen zum nächsten Sheet, das machst du?
Ja, das machen wir. Ja, genau.
Gut, prima, das ist normal. Zero-Emission Stadtlogistik, Green Deal, Zero-Emission City Logistics. Der Anfang von dieses Programm war am 2015. Vielleicht nächste Sheet bitte. Ja, das ist noch ein Bild prä-Corona, das ist deutlich, aber das ist das am Samstag in Amsterdam. Viele Leute, die im Stadt sind und die Autoweg und die Busweg da in Mitte ist leer. Und da gibt es mal einen Tuk-Tuk da. Das heißt, dass das Denken über, was ist die Funktion der Stadt und auch was ist die Funktion von der Weg im Stadt, soll das alles optimiert sein auf PKW und LKW oder sind die Leute, die da im Stadt sein, müssen die Überhand haben müssen. Und das hat einen Schritt in Denken gebracht, dass wir sollten gehen zu Zero-Emission in Städten und auch auf weniger Bewegung. Es ist nicht nur CO2, Kohlenstoffausstoß, aber auch die Menge der LKW und PKW in die Stadt soll gesenkt werden. Nächste bitte. Ja, was man heute auch sieht in den Morgen in der Stadt wie Amsterdam, dass viele LKW miteinander kämpfen um die Platz in die Stadt, um die Sachen zu besorgen bei Leuten und auch bei Geschäften. Ein Weg, um den Einfluss vom LKW im Stadt zu senken, ist die Beschränkung in der Zeit, dass man im Stadt gehen kann. Viele Städte hat man eine Möglichkeit bis 11 Uhr morgens und dann nicht mehr. Und dann hat man ein Stau kann man haben von Leuten, die da sein müssen. So, was sollten wir machen? Nächste bitte. In 2015 ist da eine Green Deal, wie man das heißt, Zero-Emission Stadtlogistik gemacht. Das ist von der Website. Nächste bitte. Und da sind über 54 Organisationen, die zusammenarbeiten mit dem Ziel, was können wir probieren und ausfinden in Praxis in der Zeit von 2015 bis 2020, um dann die richtige Weg zu finden in 10 Jahren, das ist 2025, so viel wie möglich emissionsfrei in der Binnenstadt zu besorgen. Während die Zeit von 2015 bis 2020 hat man gesehen, dass es nicht nur Emissionen, aber auch immer mehr weniger LKW oder kleine LKW oder was man auch weniger PKW, dass es zusammengekommen ist. In 2019, im Klimaakkord, ist diesen Ziel zu einem offiziellen Ziel gemacht und jetzt sind da große Diskussionen zwischen anderen Parteien, um das zu einem wichtigen Deal zu machen, wie man das genau macht, wie groß die Zonen sind und was man dafür machen soll. Nächste bitte. Was wir identifiziert haben in Experimente ist in diesen Website, das können Sie greendeal6.nl, können Sie ausfinden. All diese Beispiele sind klassifiziert und findbar gemacht, so man kann sagen, was tut man da, wie macht man das, was sind die Möglichkeiten überall in den Niederlanden. Und wenn das weitergeht, nächste bitte, dann kann man Videos finden auf YouTube. Das sind viele davon, wo Leute erzählen über ihre Praxis. Wie macht man das? Wie hat man das gemacht? Was sind die Sachen, die man gelernt hat, um anderen zu stimulieren, das selber zu machen. Nächste bitte. Was auch gemacht ist, ist eine Database von Elektromobilität verfügbare LKW zu erstellen und zu finden, was kann man damit tun, wie viel kostet das. Und das geht von den größeren über 3500 Kilogramm Bestellwagen und auch etwas, was sehr schnell wächst, was wir sagen Light Electric Cargo Vehicle. Das ist von Elektro unterstützte, wie sagt man das, Cargo Bikes bis zu alles, was man so hat, das so nicht genau ein LKW, nicht ein PKW ist und sich genau spezialisiert auf der Stadt. Da gibt es eine Menge von. Und wir sehen, dass spezifisch die Cargo Bikes, die elektroassistierte Cargo Bikes, sehr schnell wachsen. Nächste bitte. Die Unterstützung von um Städte weiterzugehen, da ist eine Gruppe Spes, die alle Städte, die eine Zone einrichten müssen, können unterstützen. Wie tut man das von das Ministerium? Nächste bitte. Und da gibt es auch Roadmaps, um zum 2020 Analyse, Position, ein Plan, wie groß wird die Zone. Das ist am Ende dieses Jahres, Anfang nächstes Jahr wird das in jeder Stadt offiziell festgestellt und dann hat man die Vorbereitung und dann weiß auch jeder, der in die Stadt geht, in 4 Jahren Zeit, was ist dann dran, wie geht das mit uns, was sind die Ausnahmen und so weiter und so weiter. Das ist schon vorbereitet. Nächste bitte. Von der Logistik aus gibt es dann natürlich viele Studien auch über, was ist das dann Stadtlogistik. Das ist eine Container, aber in diesem Container, wenn man weitergeht, dann ist da alles da, vielen darin, was so im Stadt geht. Nächste bitte. Das Unterschied ist von General Cargo bis zu E-Commerce und Post, Sachen, die temperaturkontrolliert und konditioniert sein sollen. Service Logistics, Waste Logistics, Konstruktion Logistics und so weiter. Wenn man von der Größe aussieht, dann redet man sehr viel über E-Commerce und Paketenlogistik, aber das ist der kleinste in alles. Aber das, was die meisten Leute am meisten sehen. Der größte ist Bau. Zum Beispiel Paketen sind 3–4% von was passiert. Bau ist 40%. Aber wenn man in Zeitungen liest, dann geht es immer über E-Commerce und so weiter. Die Bedingungen für jeden diesen Cargo-Types, wie man sagen, sind ganz anders. Das heißt auch, wenn man zur Elektromobilität geht, viele unterschiedliche Bedingungen und so weiter. Wir haben eine Studie gemacht für Amsterdam und da sieht man, dass die meisten Ladestellen für Bestellwagen und so weiter sind an der Grenze von der Stadt zu Hause. Aber alles, was ein bisschen größer ist, das ladet nicht in der Stadt, das ladet nicht in offenbare Ladestellen, aber Schnelllader auf Privatplätzen. Und das macht eine ganze Menge aus. Auch wie man die Ladeinfrastruktur ausbaut, soll in logistische Struktur passen. Eine halbe Stunde Warte ist 45 € in verlorene Lohnkosten und so weiter. So, das ist eine ganz andere finanzielle Beziehung als mit PKW. Und das macht eine ganze Menge aus. Wenn man diesen Typ von Logistik sich anschaut, von der Gemeinde aus oder von der Gebiet aus, dann gibt es so ungefähr 4 Familien. Eine Familie von Logistik ist, wir wissen es nicht, das sind die Leute mit einem kleinen Bestellwagen, die im Stadt rundfahren, wie mit einem LKW und PKW. Das ist fast nicht Logistik zu nennen, aber in Logistik kann man sehen, dass man in generell 3 Strukturen hat. Nächste bitte. Der einzige Struktur sind, was man nennt, Full Truckloads, zum Beispiel zum Warenhäuser und Lebensmittel, Aldi, Lidl und so weiter. Oder große Baustelle. Und was man sieht ist, in einer gewissen Zeitraum immer die gleiche Punkt, wenig Punkte, große LKWs fully loaded und so weiter. Ganz strukturiert. Kann man gut einen Deal machen mit den Leuten, die da liefern. Das sind professionelle Lieferanten und die wissen, wie das geht. Das ist ganz gut zu tun. Gibt es doch in der, wie man da sagt, die Bedingungen, die man mitnehmen muss. Zum Beispiel Lieferanten zum Lebensmittel früh im Morgen. Dann ist es gut, um die etwas zu haben, das den Lärm von Laden und Entladen wegnimmt. Anders hat man Probleme mit den Bewohnungen in die Umgebung von das Geschäft. Nächste bitte. Das zweite ist, was man nennt General Cargo, Irregular, Ad hoc, Less than Truckloads, sagt man dann in Deutsch. Das heißt, das gibt so die Pallets und schickt man mal das, schickt man mal das. Zu groß, um das nicht zum LKW zu machen, aber man weiß nie, wie das geht, wohin das geht. Ja, und da sieht man, dass verschiedene Maßnahmen genommen können werden, dass ein Hub am Grenze der Stadt offen verfügbar gestellt wird. Nächste. Und dann sieht man alles, was kleiner ist als ein Pallet. Und dann sieht man, dass was die logistische Struktur, die für E-Commerce entwickelt ist, sehr gut und sehr effizient ist und auch die anderen Typen Cargo mitnehmen können. Zum Beispiel für Bau, für Service-Logistik und so weiter. Das ist nicht Beschäftigten ist es viel besser, wenn für zum Beispiel, wenn man ein Kopiergerät Service haben braucht, man braucht Parts dazu, dass die Parts zum gleichen Struktur wie E-Commerce gebracht werden, zum der Platz, wo es der Service gemacht wird und dass der Monteur mit einem Fahrrad, wie das geht, und das passiert jetzt in den Niederlanden, zu der Platz geht, wo der Kopiergerät steht. Und dann sehen wir, dass B2B und B2C zusammen gemacht wird, dass man Mikrohubs hat. Was ist ein Mikrohub? Das kann auch ein gekühltes LKW sein, die vor 3 Stunden an einen Elektroanschluss ohne Lärm da steht zu kühlen und jemand im Fuß alle Restaurants da in einem Kreis von 300 Meter beliefert und so weiter. Also was man im Zusammenhang sieht, ist, dass die Entwicklung von wir sollen etwas machen, das ist nicht nur für CO2, aber auch für die, wie man sagt, Ruhe im Stadt wichtig ist. Wie macht man das? Strukturierte Ausrollen, alle keine Probleme, die man hat, sondern in das zu machen. In Elektrologistik wieder entwickelt und Strukturierung von, wie geht denn das in der Logistik? Wie kann man das Unterschied machen zwischen all diesen verschiedenen Sorten Güter, die in die Stadt gebracht wird? Nächste. Und was man da sieht, ist, dass sehr viel gut läuft und einfach läuft und gut läuft. Die Gruppe, die am wichtigsten oder größte Kopfschmerzen gibt, sind die kleinen LKW, Bestellbus, die so viele Anwendungen hat und so unterschiedlich ist und auch wie einen reisenden Werkplatz oder reisenden Magazin und so weiter mitgenommen wird, dass das nicht einfach umzusetzen ist. Wir brauchen auch öfter von billige LKWs oder Bestellwagen von 10 Jahren alt, die können bis 20, 22 Jahre alt werden. Und die Kostpreis per Kilometer ist so niedrig, dass es nicht einfach ist, um das überzusetzen auf elektrisch. Wie man damit umgehen muss, das ist die große Diskussion jetzt in den Niederlanden. Das ist so ungefähr, was ich erzählen möchte über den Green Deal.
Vielen Dank, Herr Herman Wagter, für das Überblick, über wie das eigentlich in den Niederlanden jetzt passiert und funktioniert. Ich habe schon eine erste Frage und wenn man natürlich andere Fragen noch gibt, bitte nutzen dafür die Chat auch. Erste Frage über die Niederlandse Städte haben schon die erste Erfahrung mit der Einführung von emissionsfreie City Logistics oder Fahrzeuge. Gibt es auch von Ihrer Perspektive Ideen oder Erfahrungen, die sehr gut waren in den Niederlanden und die vielleicht auch besser sein könnten und auch die deutschen Städte nutzen können, um die ersten Schritte mit emissionsfreie City Logistics zu machen?
Was man sieht, ist, dass es einen großen Unterschied gibt zwischen den professionellen Logistikparteien. Die sind vordermann, die wollen gern, die haben Ideen, wollen investieren. Und an die andere Seite die Leute, die mit diesen Bestellwagen umfahren wie ein PKW und ein Magazin und so weiter. Das ist das große Unterschied. Es gibt eine ganz andere Beziehung, ganz andere, wie man das umgehen muss. Die letzte Gruppe ist ein bisschen spät im Bild gekommen in den Niederlanden. Aber da muss man als Erste mit anfangen. Das ist das Erste, was man machen muss. Das Zweite, das Unterschied zwischen Logistik ist abhängig von das Gut, Lebensmittelbau und so weiter. Das ist nicht definiert bei das Fahrzeug, aber bei den Bedingungen im Cargo. Und das ist auch das ist gut gegangen. Und was wir jetzt sehen, was eine, wie sagt man das, Advies, Vorschlag, so etwas ist für Deutschland ist, wir haben gemerkt, dass die statistischen Daten, die man nutzt, um Ladeinfrastruktur gut zu positionieren oder um ganz genau zu sehen, wie man das macht mit einer Zone, dass in vielen Fällen die Statistik nicht reicht. Das sind Aggregate nur ungefähr. Das ist ein ganz großes Problem, wenn man nicht in die Tiefe geht, was man machen will, man ganz genaue statistische Daten haben muss. Und wir haben realisiert, dass wir das etwas ein Sprint machen müssen, um das besser auf Niveau zu bringen. Und das soll man früh mit anfangen.
Mhm. Und wie kann man das genau tun, um die Daten verfügbar zu bekommen? Geht es auch um Daten von den Fahrzeugen zu haben, zum Beispiel?
Zum Beispiel, es gibt viele Mengen, aber wir haben es jetzt dann, um zu definieren, ganz genau strukturiert, welche Daten man haben muss für welches Ziel. Und dann davon zu machen, dass die statistische Gruppe in Holland, das Zentralbüro für Statistik, der Empfänger wird für diesen Daten und das auch replizieren kann und dass in jeder Untersuchung oder jede Effort, die man macht, um Daten aufzuhalten, dass man die Daten auf diesen Format macht und zu CBS gibt. Und dann kann man APPM, das heißt Automatic Number Plate Recognition Kameras, Leute, die im Sessel sitzen, jeden Morgen und zahlen und wie sagt man das, zählen, wie viel und wo welche Typ von LKWs langskommen.
Also die Anzahl pro Type PKW, kann man sagen, ja.
Ja, oder eben doch die Fotos nehmen von der Außenseite und das ist ein Foto. Das ist jemand, die in diesem Kategoriefeld kommt sechsmal in Woche und so weiter. Und das hochrechnen.
Ja, also das gibt dann einen Eindruck, wie das funktioniert. Das kann dann wichtig sein, wie sind dann die Zielgruppe, um erst die Transition zu machen und wie man auch die Ladeinfrastruktur braucht.
Genau.
Ja.
Sehr wichtig.
Alles klar. Okay. Es gibt im Moment keine andere Fragen. So herzlichen Dank für die Vortrag. Ich glaube, sehr, sehr interessant, um das Überblick zu bekommen. Hoffentlich bleibt ihr auch noch verfügbar für andere Fragen oder andere Fragen weiter jetzt in das Webinar.
Ich habe eine Frage, richtet sich auf Anteile Lieferungen mit Cargo-Bikes.
Oh ja, kommt jetzt, ja, das war bei mir noch nicht verfügbar. Also die Fragen haben wir dann noch, genau. Entschuldigung. Ja. Ja, so ist das wie hoch ist eigentlich die Anteil von Lieferungen mit Cargo-Bikes in den Niederlanden? Ist das da etwas mehr über zu erzählen?
Die ganz genaue Zahl habe ich nicht, aber man sieht von der Steigerung von den Lieferungen von Cargo-Bikes und die Anzahl der Lieferanten von Cargo-Bikes, dass es jetzt ganz schnell geht in Großstädten. Also, aber die genaue Zahlen, da muss ich einen Tag haben, dann habe ich die Zahlen.
Und erwarten Sie auch, dass das größer wird in die nächsten Jahre?
Oh ja, das wächst sehr schnell.
Okay.
Das breitet sich aus. In Amsterdam, glaube ich, ist es schon jemand, die an der Weg arbeitet und die Stoep-Trottoir repariert. Wie sagt man das? Stoep in Deutsch?
Das ist eine gute Frage. Die Straße, aber die Laufstraße darf ich sagen, das heißt vielleicht anders, aber...
Ja, das Trottoir oder
ja.
Fußgängerteil von der Straße reparieren muss. Die machen das jetzt mit Cargo-Bikes. Und das ist ein Mann mit vielen Tattoos auf ein Elektro-Bike mit Sand und Steine und ein Material da, weil es viel einfacher ist, weil es schneller da geht, weil er kein Problem mit Parkieren hat und so weiter.
Wow, das ist doch sehr, sehr interessant, das zu sehen und zu lernen. Ja. Okay, es gibt noch eine letzte Frage und dann gehen wir auch weiter mit den anderen Sprechern. Können Sie auch noch etwas erzählen über die Einrichtung von Microhubs? Würden das für Flächen von die Stadt verfügbar gestellt, zum Beispiel, ist die Frage?
Also es ist jetzt eine große Untersuchung, weil man da Konkurrenz hat zum teuren 4 Quadratmeter. Die besten Plätze für Mikrohubs sind teure Quadratmeter, die auch sehr gut sind für Personenmobilität oder Geschäfte oder was. Die sind auf der besten Platz im Stadt. So, man muss das kombinieren. Also es gibt eine wesentliche ruimtelijke ordening, wie sagt man das auf Deutsch?
Special Planning auf Englisch.
Special Planning Problem da,
Raumplanung.
Wie man das machen soll. Und dass es nicht jeder Privatpartei auf jedem Platz ein Mikrohub platzieren soll. So, das ist eine der meist interessanten Probleme von den nächsten 6 bis 12 Monaten. Wie man das einpositioniert in Städten, die schon ein großes Problem haben, Quadratmeter für Wohnungen zu finden.
Ja, kann ich mir auch vorstellen. Ist es dann auch so, dass dann ein Microhub nur für ein Gebiet oder ein Flache von einer Stadt funktioniert? Oder kann es sein, dass mehrere die Gebiete...
die eine große Konzession macht, aber das vielleicht auch kombiniert mit öffentlichen Transportstationen oder Mobility Service Hubs oder etwas. Das muss kombiniert werden, anders wird es zu teuer.
Ja, alles klar. Okay, das war es heute dann für die Fragen am Moment. Noch einmal vielen, vielen Dank für die Vortrag und wir machen jetzt weiter mit dem nächsten Sprecher. Das ist dann Herr Frank ten Wolde und er bringt die Erfahrung rein heute von der Stadt Rotterdam. So Frank, er ist schon da. Vielen Dank, dass auch du hier heute bist und wir schauen mal, wir freuen uns auf Ihren Vortrag auch natürlich.
Ja, guten Tag, danke für die Einführung, Herman. Mit Ihrer Zustimmung werde ich die Präsentation auf Englisch halten. Next slide, please. First, some theory. Here you see the Rogers adaptive curve. It describes how new innovations and ideas are accepted and adopted by groups and cultures. The curve highlights the acceptations of new ideas by the society through 5 stages. Normally we will see the innovators, the early adapters, and oh, he's building up. I'm sorry, I wasn't aware of that. That's new. So you see the curve. That means the 5 stages. First we have the innovators, and then we have a bigger group, the early adapters. And in the end, we see the late majority and the laggers, and then you have the totally round of a new innovation in a transition situation. In this picture, it always shows the phases of the technical development, what it started with the research and development, and after the scales up, finally you will have the phase of maintenance. Next slide, please. There is no one EV, no type of EV is the same. So every type of a car in this new market has his own path through the curve of Rogers. For example, I have made here in red heavy duty. Heavy duty is, I think, still in the pilot phase. There are some companies that are willing to learn and willing to explore some heavy duty electric trucks, but it's still in the pilot and R&D phase. If you look, for example, to taxis in the Netherlands, we see that the taxis are electric taxis are more common, but not all companies are willing to use electric taxis. For example, in the urban areas, but they are still in another phase, in a little scale up. And if we look to the passenger cars in the Netherlands, we see a scale up of these cars. So you can see there is a really market development over there. In the last month, 20% of all our new sales, car sales in the Netherlands was an electric car. So there you have the main majority. Here you have the big group, and you can almost say that there is the transition curve has passed the point of no return. Next slide, please. But why is it important to know as a policymaker? Well, I think, and I see, and I practice that you have, as policymaker, you can do 3 things to accelerate innovation. You can stimulate, you can facilitate, and you can regulate. It depends on the phase of the transition on the S-curve, which policy will have the most effect. There is no one measure for all EVs. So it doesn't help right now in my example to give a high stimulation for heavy duty, because they are still in the research and development stage. But you can facilitate the research and development. Okay, next slide. So if we go back to this picture again, you see that we have in the Netherlands, to get the acceleration of electric vehicles, we have fiscal matters in the first years, and almost for the passenger cars, you can say maybe we have to change our policy because we are good on the S-curve right now. We really scale up, and we almost have all the early majority in an electric vehicle. It is different for the private passenger cars. So that are people that are still looking for the amount of money that they can expend for the vehicle. That's an example of stimulation. When we look, if you are stimulate electric vehicles, there is no question that the amount of public charges will grow. So a good role for us as a municipality is to facilitate a public charging network. And maybe in the end, you can say as a policymaker, okay, if we are on the late majority, now there is a time that we also want to be a regulation, for example, with a zero emission zone. So only you can drive there with a zero emission vehicle. Next slide, please. That is some theory. Now we look what we have done in the city of Rotterdam. We have made an urban mobility plan, and it is focused on the and based on the trias mobilica. So we look to the volume. We try to avoid unnecessary driving. And if you have to drive, we are taking the chance of you can make a model shift. So did you need from point A to B with a car? Don't you can use the public transport? Don't you can use typical Dutch, the bike, or for that example. And the last thing is, if you are willing and you need necessary to use a vehicle, well, let's make it zero emission then. And our approach is to totally focus on make it clean, make it zero emission. Next slide. So our approach is based on 3 pillars. As a municipality, first of all is our ideology. We see a high pollution of CO2. We want to reduce them. So it is sustained. It is better for our inhabitants. So there will be health. So go from a car to a bike is also good for health. We as a municipality also are responsible for the public space. So we can create a network for what is necessary for a charging point. We can create, we can ask to the market to facilitate hydrogen stations, for example, because it is our own place. And in the end, we have an accessibility city, so that is good for our economy. It is nice to live there, it is healthy, and your logistics can be on a high speed from A to B. Next slide. Our approach is aimed at 4 pillars. So we focus on passenger cars, we focus on freight transport, we have an own municipality fleet, and we create a charging and fueling infrastructure. So if we look to the passenger mobility, we see in our city special groups like dedicated transport for people that go to college or disabled people. We as a municipality ask the market to facilitate that kind of groups. So if you ask to facilitate that kind of groups, we also can demand that they are driving zero emission. And of course, we have the electric buses. At this moment in Rotterdam, there are over more than 50 electric buses driving for more than a year now, and we are accelerate to the next level. So we will add another 50 buses in the end of next year. And now we are installing again a new charging network for the buses. Well, if we look for the freight transport in the city, of course, Rotterdam is part of the Green Deal Zero Emission City Logistics. Herman has presented that before me. And what we have done in Rotterdam, we have created an own community. We call it Logistics 010. And in that community, there are over more than 1,300 parties that are willing to share all that they have in the urban of the Rotterdam area. And of course, we as policymakers, it's also practice what you preach. So our total municipality fleet has to be zero emission. We have created an own plan for that. So our passenger cars of the city will be zero emission in the end of 2023. The light vehicles like little buses it will have to be zero emission in 2025. And our heavy commercial vehicles we all still have in our own fleet has to be zero emission in the end of 2030. We now are having pilot with 2 electric garbage trucks, and we discovered that it is the garbage truck does better work than we expected. But there are also some kind of challenges to have a big electric garbage truck driving in your city. Sometimes is bigger than we are used to the normal garbage trucks. And of course, our role about facilitation is charging our public charging network. We have placed over more than 2,000 public chargers in the city of Rotterdam, and we also looking for places where we can facilitate, or where we can ask the market to facilitate hydrogen. But that is very tough in a high population city like Rotterdam. But that will be maybe a new phase after 2025. This was a short presentation from my kind of field. I hope there are some questions.
Hi Frank, thanks a lot for your presentation. At first, I've set myself some questions. Actually, I think the last slide is giving a great overview about the things and the policies of the city of Rotterdam. And so there are several target groups or policy areas the city has. And as far as I know, a lot of German cities have these kind of questions as well. So what can they do with public transport or public transit? What can they do with their own municipal fleet? What can they do with charging infrastructure and so on? As I know, you've been working on the electric buses in the city of Rotterdam in the last years. Can you elaborate a bit on the challenges for the city to develop this network of charging infrastructure for the buses, and what can they do to stimulate the growth of the number of electric buses in the city as well?
Yeah. Well, I think the buses are in the, just to go back to my presentation, the buses are in the stage of the early adapter or the early majority stage in the Netherlands, I think. So it isn't hard to buy or to ask for a zero emission bus, but the main part, the hard part, is to install the charging infrastructure in the city. It is so intense, and the charger that you saw on the picture, yeah, that's not the big issue. But the big issue is how to get a good grid connection, and a grid connection to build for your buses. At the picture I have showed, there are 5 charging stations, and you need a grid connection like big as a container of 40 feet. And you can't put a 40 feet container in in the heart of your city. So how do you work that away? Well, in this case, we find some space in the metro station, but that are the hard part to drive and to facilitate an electric bus, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so getting the charging infrastructure installed, including grid connection, is maybe the hardest part. And so when we take a similar city, Rotterdam is, I think, quite representative for the German city as well, looking to the size and etc. Mm-hmm. But what will be the biggest tips for getting these charging infrastructure in the physical environment and including the grid connection? Is that planning? Is that creative thinking? Is it something else?
It will always start with creative thinking, but start early. Don't think that if you have places in your planning that you think it is impossible to install there your charging infrastructure. We have started with 20 places, and in the end we can actually create 5 places we have charging infrastructure, and that was nobody expected that. Everybody has said, okay, we have 20 places in mind, so there will be a problem. Well, there were a lot of problems to install all that kind of things, and we are happy to have now 5 places where the buses can charge.
Mm-hmm. All clear. So that's actually a kind of a trial and error approach, I would say, to make it in summary of your storyline. There's another question. It's a question from someone saying a lot of German cities have the question how to finance and to fund these charging infrastructure hubs and all that kind of things. How does it work in the city of Rotterdam, or maybe in the Netherlands in general?
Rotterdam is different than the rest of the Netherlands.
Always.
Always, because our public transporter has in the past was part of the city. So we have asked them to come with a good proposal to have all buses electric in at least at 2030. And we say you can explore all the lines for a time of 15 years, but in that 15 years you also are you can earn your money back what you have to when you install your own charging infrastructure. So the public transporter went to the Bank of Europe. They have a good loan with low interest, and so basically they are the owner of the infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's even funded by themselves, or they get the funds available for it. And is it similar for other cities in the Netherlands? Do you know something about that?
Well, if we this especially for the city, if we look for the Netherlands, normally there will be a concession for one province. It depends on the province, but sometimes they will dedicate it, install by themselves the infrastructure, and then they said to the public transporter, well, these are the places where you can have a high amount of energy. Choose your technique and go with your buses to there to charge.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a little bit different than
yeah, but mostly public funded, I would say, getting your answer.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe last question from my side before we move on to the next speaker. Are there any documents available online or about the e-mobility concept of the city of Rotterdam we could share afterward with the German participants today, or any websites?
Yeah, we can share the zero-emission approach. It is
that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, but we can share it. It's on our website, but I will send it to you afterward.
Yeah, and we'll include it with the presentation and slide deck we will share with all the participants today. Okay. And Herman Wagter from Connekt is even adding that there's a national charging infrastructure plan in development in the Netherlands. It's absolutely correct, of course, for each type of vehicle. So that's a good addition, I think, to the answer Frank already gave. So, Frank, thanks a lot for your presentation. You have to move on to another meeting, I guess. You informed me beforehand. So thanks a lot for being here today and your presentation.
Welcome.
And well I said, thanks a lot. Dann machen wir jetzt weiter nach die dritte Sprecher von heute. Das macht ein bisschen schwierig, wieder nach Deutsch zu gehen. Das ist Frau Jillian von der Gaag von der die Stadt Amsterdam. Und die Stadt Amsterdam hat natürlich ein größeres Ziel für emissionsfreies Verkehr bei 2030. Ist Jillian auch schon da?
Yes, I'm here.
Super. Well, thanks a lot for being here, and we're looking forward to your presentation as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Herman. So my name is Jillian van der Gaag, and I work for the City of Amsterdam for the air quality program. Basically, I focus on, especially on European affairs, but also on the whole Amsterdam electric strategy. So next slide, please. So actually, everything started like 40 years ago. Of course, it's not only about zero emission now, but it is already for a while that we focus not only on how to get everything zero emission, but first start from private cars and how to switch towards other modes of mobility. So more active and clean mobility. So of course, bikes. Well, as you might all know that bikes is really, there's a big policy. The City of Amsterdam, of course, has been developing for so many years. But we first, the king is the pedestrian. So first we try that people walk for their health, for safety, then biking, and then public transport. So that are like the three pillars that we really focus on. And then, of course, we go to the cars. So everything like the moving vehicles. So how do we do that? We really focus as well to get less parking lots, especially on the street. and make, especially these parking lots, make it more friendly for the public. In the end, it's public space. So why use it for just a private vehicle if you can do a lot of other nice things with it, like developing parks, more space for pedestrians. Of course, city of Amsterdam, it's high density, so we really need to be very smart with all the space we have, since it is not so many. There's not so many spaces. So there's a really good example. What we did in one neighborhood in Amsterdam is that under the canal we have on one street is we built a garage, underground garage. So there is for the inhabitants, there is space to park there under the canal, and the visitors, they need to figure out how they will come to that space. And then we of course really focus it's above, the public space. They really focus on bike lanes, place where you can park your bike, and of course just space to live. So people really enjoyed the green spaces in the city, and the cars are not so visible anymore. So you're really not focusing on the cars, but focus on what's more left, and what's very nice to see and to focus on. So that's, I think, our big strategy from Amsterdam. And also, of course, on the new buildings. So, of course, we need to focus on less car spaces also within the new public or parking space for households, especially in the newer buildings. Next slide, please.
Jillian, there's something wrong with your connection, I guess. We can't hear you anymore. Are you still there? Can see you, but I can't hear you. Something wrong with your microphone, maybe.
Maybe I can try.
Yeah. You're back again. Thanks.
Okay. I'll just try it like that then. Okay, so basically we separated the option to move inside the city from one side. On the left side is like the inhabitants of the city, and the other side are like the visitors. So as you can see on the left side is that 35% uses bikes, of course, which is a lot. And then you see at the end that only 90% use a car, basically not to go around the city, but more to go outside the city. And of course, mopeds only 2%, and public transport 19%. And from the other side, you can see on the right side are the visitors, and then you see that this is a bit different. So the bikes are only 5%, and this is of course quite obvious. But then you see 40% use public transport that's coming outside the city, because especially we have also these parking lots outside the city, and so people can park their cars there for really really cheap, and then come inside the city center by public transport. And then of course, there are also you see there's still 46% of cars, so that's of course we need to focus on to change that. But that's basically the people really park their cars outside of the city. And then you also see that what we achieved from the right-hand side is that between 2005 and 2017 is that especially the inhabitants, they increased their bicycle use with 6%. The car use decreased with 8%, which of course is really good. And then the visitors, they increased public transport. They could use less their cars, so it's minus 10%. And especially we really focus now on the space the cars use within a public space, and that's for like 80 square meters for only just one car. And if you compare it to the other types of transports, then you can really see that it's such a huge amount if you compare to the other ways. So that's also, I think, a really big argument to not focus on private cars, but just look for other alternatives. Next slide, please. So then we really focus. So if people really need to use the car, okay, then let's go electric. So Amsterdam is really focusing on a zero-emission area to be healthy for the people. We've got, especially at the moment, we've got an action plan that the city is really focusing on getting the city clean for her inhabitants. It's of course it's a public space. Of course it's safety as well, but also it's just healthy air that we are all breathing. And I think this is also, well, I will continue on the next slide with this. Next slide, please. Our biggest argument actually is to focus on electric driving. So then battery electric, of course, I mean, is that Amsterdam is a city that still cannot uphold with all the European standards for air quality. Of course, I need to say that now with COVID, I think it has changed. So for sure, the data is getting way better and it's quite positive. But of course, that's only for now. So even though it's a small city, still we've got some challenges to focus on. And then we can see on the right side that nitrogen it decreased, and also a particular measure, but still it's not enough. And it's only those two elements, but also of course we've got black carbon and we've got a lot of other emissions that are really bad for public health. So this is also one of the reasons how we can get arguments for the people and make sure they understand how important it is to focus and to not take their car, but take other means of transport. Because in the end, there are a lot of researchers that in the end people that live in Amsterdam, so the citizens, they die one year earlier than other people outside the city. So that's one of the public policy arguments, is to focus on this issue and to make public or allocate public funds to this program, is because the deputy mayor promised to so this 1 year to at least improve it with a few months, so give a few months more to live for the citizens. So you really make it really concrete. The communication is really important to make sure people really understand why we're working on this topic. Especially now with COVID, talking about life and death and health. I think this is also really, really important. People are getting way more conscious about this, about this in general. And also we, of course, talk about CO2. There's a 9% reduction. Of course, CO2 is also very important, but especially the local, so air quality, which is the local emissions. For people, they really understand why it's so important, because their health. Next slide, please. And of course, there's way more to go. So in 2030, we've got this big, ambitious objective to be an emission-free city. So to have everything battery electric, of course, hydrogen is also included, but it's just emission-free. That's our definition. And of course, we need to do it together with a lot of stakeholders, and this is one of the biggest parts. We need to do it together. So with the citizens, with the companies, and how do we do it? Well, to offer smart solutions and pilots to show that it works. It really works. So you just start with a small group of people or organizations that are really willing to show that they are very key and it really works. They really are willing to invest and like take some risks, and then to show that they're green and they really want to work on this transition. And then, of course, you need to communicate that it really works. And then, of course, charging infrastructure. This question of chicken and the egg story for Amsterdam, it's for such a long time already. people can't say I can't buy a car because, or I can't drive electric because there's no infrastructure. That's we showed it for a while that we make sure there is, and this is especially one of the reasons that it really works, I think, in Amsterdam as well, that we make sure we're really taking care of this element of facilitating electric driving already for a long time. Next slide, please. So smart charging, I think this is also one of the big projects, and to be smart with how things work, because you can, of course, if everybody will in the end drive electric, we get a really big grid problem. There's, of course, more and more, there's more like pressure on the grid. The electricity demand is increasing rapidly, and so we need to be smart. And that's why we've got this pilot, a very interesting project that we focus on vehicles to grid. So use the vehicle as like an extra battery. So if there is enough if there's enough energy in the car, maybe for example, you don't need to use the car on certain days. You just use the car as a battery, and if you need more electricity in the house, in your household, for example, the car can give back the energy it has been storing. This is very interesting. And also we want to have flexible pricing, for example. So not only if you just charge your car, it has the same price in every hour of the day. It really depends on the demand and supply of the energy system. So this is flexible, and people will get conscious when they will charge their car, how fast they want the car to be charged, because sometimes you don't always need a full battery to go everywhere. You can also sometimes you just know you will use the car a little bit less, then you just charge it slowly, and it depends on the grid and the demand and supply when you will and how much energy you will get, and that's also depending on the price. So this is, I think, really one of the smart solutions we're working on. So of course there will be some boundaries or barriers or problems when you're in a transition. That's being a part of the process. But you can always find solutions, and I think this is one of the really smart solutions we offer. Next slide, please. So how do we come to a city of zero emission in 2030? Well, around now, I think like 12 years ago, we set already a target of to be like a emission-free city. So we put like a dot on the horizon. This is where we go. This is where we want to be. And then you need to, of course, define, so what are the steps in between? So then we defined that in 2030, it will be all emission-free. So that's for all the types of transport. And then you count back. So then we say, okay, so we've got this zone in 2025, which is like the orange one. This is the ring road. So this is like a highway around the city. And within this this ring, we need to have the types of transports also emission-free. But the ones that can be already a bit earlier, they can be emission-free. For example, of course, the buses, the public transport, we can focus on that, the cars, but also, for example, some boats that are in the canals. A lot of them are already emission-free, but also small vehicles. And then we come back also in 2022. There are already some means of transport that can be even quicker, zero emission, like buses and coaches. So really focusing on that. Next slide, please. So how do we communicate this? So we decided to have this ambition, then to take a few and to communicate and to announce that we are going to do it this way. And of course, we also discussed it with a lot of organizations. So how we are going to do this. So of course, important is communication and to involve a lot of stakeholders so everybody knows about it and you think together how are we going to do it. So we're really inviting everybody to help us with this development. And of course, the way you communicate is very important. So we've got a few steps, right, in 2020, 2021. We also have a very good connection with the taxi sector, because we just first focus on the early adapters. So who, this may be a recommendation I could give to the German cities, is focus on what are the types of organizations that are willing to take quicker steps. And if they, for example, drive a lot or use a lot their vehicles, then the total cost of ownership of their vehicles will be, of course, they will be very, very nice. They can, they can really, it can be even cheaper to have electric vehicles than just the fossil fuel vehicles. So you really try to help them. So you you can have a dialogue with the organizations, show your plans and see what they need, how to achieve it together. And that's what we, for example, in agreements, we made a few agreements. We showed what our possibilities, and together you just try to compromise, of course, to negotiate. And that's also, for example, for vans, just see how the organizations are structured and with whom do you have to talk. Of course, all the conversation will not go always so smooth, but you can not only show your the regulation. So as also Frank said in his presentation before, you can regulate, communicate, regulate, stimulate, and facilitate. And well, that's of course what Amsterdam is doing already for a while. So facilitation, public or infrastructure in general. The stimulation are, for example, subsidies, and regulation is so to the zero-emission zones. But you cannot always only show the regulation, so the zero-emission zones, and say, okay, you just can't come into the city with your dirty vehicle. You always need to compromise and say, okay, but so we understand it's not so easy to comply with this new regulation, but maybe we can see what we can do then. So we announced it a few years ahead. This is what's going. So now you know already what's going to happen in 5 or 10 or even or only 2 years. So you can prepare for that. And with subsidies, you show so not only the stick with the regulation, but also the carrots with some subsidies. And then together you announce it. And of course, there will be people that will not be happy. But at least you are very clear in your communication and the dialogue with the organizations. Next slide, please. So of course, revising the carbon emission trend. That's the trend, as you can see in this graph. It's very nice that mobility is a pretty small part actually. If you compare it to electricity and also harbor and industry. Which is like the green part, and electricity is the blue part. But you can see that there was still in between 2010 and 2016 it still increased, and we really need to go towards that it will decrease at least with 55%. That's the target. So we need to work on that, and this is of course helping a lot with our zero emission 2030. But time is flying. We only have 10 years now, so we have to keep on working on that. Next slide, please. So the action plan that was one of our biggest policy instruments. So a lot of work, a lot of pilots, a lot of different types of instruments, and then put it all together in one action plan. Communicate that with the others, with all the stakeholders in the city, and see how we can implement it. And of course now we're working more, so this to put this ambition, to put the dot on the horizon and all the instruments, and now we're really focusing on in smaller steps how to implement it and how we monitor as well the action plan. Next slide, please. So this is what we want, right? This type of image of just bicycles and sometimes just a few cars who are charging and are just small, so we can really, just have our public space there and not only full of cars. Next slide, please. What I can also show is that for the city of Amsterdam, that's maybe a bit different than other, for example, German cities, is that almost 80% of the inhabitants, they park on the streets. So this is what, of course, means that we have a lot of infrastructure to facilitate. So not everybody has access to their own charging infrastructure. So of course that means that we can really as well like focus on that and make sure it is available for everybody, you know, because it will be on the public space, and it's quite visible, which is I think a really good element. You can really see the charging infrastructure, so people are like aware of it. Of course, in the end, all the streets will be full, and it will also change. Maybe it's not so nice, but in the beginning, people are aware. Oh, you can charge here. Oh, I can drive an electric car. And also with car sharing, I think that really as well works, because then people that don't have an electric car, they can at least try and use it for some small, for some small distances, and I think that's really nice. And also, of course, having the public charging locations. So we've got a lot of gas stations. See now how we can switch, and focus really on this just charging, and also see how we can work with hydrogen on this. But I have to say the Netherlands is a bit more behind than a lot of other countries and also other cities. So yeah, basically also high flexibility in charging. I think I talked already quite a lot about that in the beginning of my presentation, that you can see that a lot of sometimes the need of charging is very little, just only little time, and parking need is way longer. So that's also what we really have to see. So we want that a person can, for example, program in their, phone, that they will be there for a few hours, but only need to charge for like a half an hour. And then the need of electricity will be not so constant, but they can charge, for example, slower. Only if, for example, if the supply of energy, for example, will be bigger. And that's what we want with the smart charging. We want to focus on that. So the flexibility, that's what it's all about in the future. Okay, next slide, please. So this is already what's happening at the moment on the streets. Is the charging facility for example, mopeds, but also for cars. It's flexible. It's all public, and people are able to use it, and it works really well. And of course, really nice to see that people are really, they really are proud to show that they are driving electric, and they put all the stickers from the City of Amsterdam, I'm driving electric, or they show, we really support this transition. And of course, it's more visible because you don't hear the electric car. Or hardly, so you don't know the car is electric. But if you make it visible, people are more aware of it. It's like, oh, interesting, and they really also experience the driving, which is of course very very nice. But also the people on the streets, they don't get bothered with the sound of a car. Next slide, please. So just to finish with my presentation, because I think it took some time already. It's just want to show that we have 57,000 users of the public charging infrastructure. It's in 2019, and also the sessions. We've got over 1 million of charging sessions. So we're going really quickly now. We've got, at the moment, we're working on a infrastructure strategy. Well, we just finished it, and we got an approval of our deputy mayor, and I think we have a really demand-driven approach, but also a bit more than that, because normally it was if one person needs a public or needs a charging station. Then we see if this person exactly really needs it. So we see the location, and we see if within the amount of meters, if it's possible to charge or not, and or else we will place exactly a charging point. But then we realized this is not enough. We see now it goes so quickly, so it's demand driven. So there's demands, and then we react on that. But we will now go a bit more like beyond that, because we really need to scale up and make sure people for now have charging stations available, but also the future, because it's going really quick. Next slide, please. Then again, an example of these car sharing vehicles, the car2go's, these very little ones. They're very nice for for people, just especially inhabitants, because it's more for in the city use, just to try the electric cars and have the experience of the driving electric car. This really helps that people really understand why we're working on this and why it's so important to get support from the people, and people are getting curious and are willing to to support this energy transition, but in the end, what it is. Next slide, please. So again, yes, you can see really nice here in the graph how is the public charging, how it's increased rapidly, especially if you look as well to the to the energy. It's also a bit worrying, as I said before, and that's why we have the smart charging, because the energy demand is increasing so quickly. So this is what we really need to focus on. But I think it's also it's a really good sign that people are really using their cars. And also, if you look a few years ago when we started only with the taxis with the Teslas, and people were really still really amazed that there were electric cars, and now you see it's so. This also smaller cars has been used, and the transition is going now so quickly. So I think it's a really good sign. Next slide, please. Talk about the taxis. There they are. So I think this is what I can really recommend to the German cities, to define one of a stakeholder group that are like driving a lot of kilometers and are willing to show, of course, with support, and talk especially to some like organization. For us, the taxi sector is really organized, so you can just talk to a few organizations, and you've got the majority of this sector, which is therefore this is also quite nice to start with, and then focus on the scale it up, and then go from early adapter to the majority. But really you have to show that it really works. Next slide, please. So one of my final slides is the international comparison. Of course, this is one of our favorite slides, since you can really see the red, in Amsterdam, you see just in red the public charging. It's really, yes, of course, with our 80% of the people who are parking on the streets. This is also one of our secrets, or the reason why it also works is that you really have to be a key player as a city, and make sure really focus on that, and make sure it is available, and you make it happen. So this is a big responsibility for the city, and maybe if a lot of people have private parking lots, it's maybe in this way it's easier to facilitate, because of course you really need to make sure you manage it well. So it's quite complex, to be honest, but it has going well so well. It's also really visible, so this is what this makes it nice. But it doesn't be easy to start with this public charging facility. Next slide, please. Yes, and it's also just you can see it for yourself. It's how the everything increased so rapidly. The charging, the kilowatts per month. It's incredible. You can see it's the cities from the right, Amsterdam, The Hague, well, the MRA, which is like the biggest like city area, and Rotterdam as well is there on the streets. Well, of course, we really like to see that Amsterdam is always on the top. That's we're quite a competitive city, but it's really nice to just to see how it is at the moment, and we can really show the success of all the investments for so many years. And to start with this, it's we're just very happy that we like took the risk, and we really focused on battery electric focused. Because like nobody of course knew like how it would be now, and the technology and the development and everything. So there's a moment you just need to take a decision. What are we going to do? Are we going to be focusing on this or not? Or what's the other approach? And then you just have to make a decision and choose for one approach. And then you will see after many years if it works or not. Next slide, please. So any questions, I would be more happy to help you. And also you can always, of course, look on our website. There's also our action plan, the Clean Air Action Plan, if you would like to check. And or else here you can send us an email as well.
Well, thanks a lot, Jillian. I think it's a very impressive storyline what the City of Amsterdam did in the last years on e-mobility and even sustainable mobility in a broader scope, you could say. We have time for a few questions, and there are a few questions as well from the crowd today. First question is more, you talked about the role of the reducing the parking space in the city, so getting a focus on cycling, walking, etc. Before you go into a car or public transit. The question is, how did the people react to this or look forward to this situation? So they're saying in Germany, parking space and car-driven focus is very important. How's the public opinion about this in Amsterdam?
Yeah, I think it's a really a process. I think it really takes quite some time, and I can also show with one like personal story about it. It's that in the beginning, of course, people are not very, if they don't see a difference yet. What's the impact of the policies, and they just will react in the beginning like, why can't I go with my car to the city to go shopping? Or so this is quite difficult in the beginning, but that's why you have to show like the whole and communicate well and show where we want to go to and what's going to happen. It's a bit difficult to make it visible. It's like showing people that now they have a normal phone, and then in the end they will all phone with mobiles. You know, people. It's difficult to imagine. But in the end, you show, for example, with this approach, for example, you just focus on a little area, and then you show what you can do with the public space. And then now you see a lot of people on Twitter, and they were sending movies to all around the world to show what Amsterdam did with their public space. And then you get the cars out of this out of the streets. In the beginning, people were pretty angry, like why can't I drive a car? So why don't I have liberty to do this? And then they saw that the children started to play on the streets and make gardens and do other stuff. And then you show what's the impact, and then people they really change. You know, so I think this is really the way it works. And also, I think maybe it could even be like a generation. I remember I could especially like share that. I remember that my mother always said, "Oh, why can't I go shopping with my little car to the city?" Well, can you see now all the little shops, they will all get broke. You know, they can't sell their products anymore. And now I can't imagine that I would go shopping with my car. Like that's, I don't know, that doesn't come to my mind. And it's also maybe so it needs some time as well to have this mind shift.
Yeah. So it takes time. You need to stay strong within your policies as a city as well. I guess from your story. Yeah. And the next question is about the cooperation between the stakeholders. So, is there a kind of cooperation between stakeholders together to reach the common goals, like reducing the amount of cars, installing the charging points, getting focused on cycling, walking, etc.? And is there a special program for it from the city perspective?
Yes, for sure. We so as I told already, for example, with taxis, we really focused. We signed agreements, few, and also we've got like a green deal for the city logistics. And this also really helps. So you can really show which are the companies that are part of this. And then, of course, if there are a few big stakeholders on that, the other ones also want to cooperate. And then it's people get really infected with the electric spirit. So that's the idea, to collaborate and also to communicate that.
Yeah, all clear. And a bit more to technical questions. At first, vehicles to grid in Amsterdam, is it kind of a pilot project in this phase, or is it already established?
Well, it's really moving very, very quickly, but it's still it's still on pilot based in this moment. We can't say it works already everywhere, so but it's very technical, and we first need to test it like broadly. But it's definitely going to work. But it's not easy to have all the organizations and everything technically, but also legally designed. So this is we're working still.
Yeah, it's developing. Okay, and then the last question for today, because we're running out of time as well. There's a question about the relationship between it's about the charging points in the city of Amsterdam, and the question is there a relationship between the number of requests the city gets for charging points and the number of charging points that are actually realized in the city? So is it about, for example, 20%, or is 100% realized, or how does that look like?
It's a very good question. It's a bit hard to say at the moment, like what's the percentage. But what we did in the beginning is to put really like specific objective and say, okay, we start with like 1,000 charging points, and then we will see. So that's also something, right? And then we saw how the demand was increasing, and then we really focused on a demand driven. So if nobody was requesting a charging point, then we would also not install it. But now we see it's so needed to be more quick with installing, and it increases so rapidly. So now we need to really focus on like a strategy rather than only demand driven. So we go to the next phase in this.
Also a developing thing. Okay.
Exactly.
Thanks a lot for your presentation once again. I think it was very, very impressive, very helpful and inspiring for the German cities and other German participants we have today. So thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Und das machen wir jetzt weiter nach unserem Abschluss für heute. Was noch wichtig ist, natürlich, dass alle Teilnehmer von heute die Präsentationen und die Folien bekommen via unsere Kollege Kolja Svensson. Wenn Sie noch Fragen haben nach dieser Webtalk, dann bitte melden Sie sich auch bei Kolja. Er ist verfügbar mit Fragen und kann auch mit die sprechen, wann das notwendig ist, die Kontakte erstellen. Aber die Kontaktdaten von den Sprechern sind natürlich auch in die Folien reingenommen. Noch ein kurzer Ausblick nach die nächste Woche. Dann haben wir noch 2 Webtalks über Elektromobilität in den Niederlanden. Nächsten Dienstag über öffentliche Ladeinfrastruktur. So, natürlich heute hat die Stadt Amsterdam auch ein bisschen darüber erzählt, aber gehen wir weiter in Detail, wie das in den Niederlanden organisiert ist und auch wie zum Beispiel die Stadt Utrecht das macht. Und auch intelligente Laden oder Smart Charging. Und nächstes Donnerstag schließen wir die 4 Webtalks ab mit die Niederlandse Anstalt für die Entwicklung von Elektromobilitätskonzepten durch Städte. So da würden wir auch mehr in Detail über sprechen. Für heute herzlichen Dank für Ihre Teilnahme und wir freuen uns auch für nächste Woche und hoffen wir einander wieder so online zu treffen. So, vielen Dank und einen schönen Tag.